Hello, and welcome back to the Nourish with Purpose podcast. It's Bailey, and I hope you're having a great Wednesday or whenever you're listening to today's episode. Today's episode is one that really, let me kind of backtrack. So I typically, when I enter into a podcast episode or I think about what I want to talk about on the podcast, I always feel like I have to have mastered something before I share it, right? Like I have to have the most perfect examples, or I have to be practicing it perfectly in order to actually talk about it. And today I'm doing something a little bit differently. I am going to be talking to you about the Sabbath, and this is a very new thing for me. Taking one day of my week to relax, to take some time away. Again, I'll kind of dive into what this has looked like for me. It's something I'm not perfect at. It's something that is very, very new for me, like I had mentioned. But I think so many of you will gain value in just learning more about the Sabbath or how you can honor the Sabbath. And I know for me, it's been very transformative. And again, this is like a very new practice, about 3 weeks old or new. But at the same time, I think there's a lot of hopefully reflection that you hear in today's episode that kind of encourages you to maybe set some boundaries, say no to some things, find that day of the week that allows you to actually feel restored. And I'm really excited just to kind of share on this today. I always have a lot of different ideas, and sometimes I'm like I just don't know if I have enough to say about it, but we're just going to kind of go with it. I feel like it was really just placed on my heart this week to share about my own experience and kind of reflect. A lot of this episode, I'm going to be referring back to a book that I've started reading. It's called God in My Everything. It's by Ken. I'm not even going to try to pronounce his last name. And I got this actually from my friend Lyndon at my baby shower you were supposed to bring a book for like baby or just kind of when you come to the shower. And I was so touched. She brought a book for me, probably because she knew that I needed this. And so I'm excited to share what I've kind of gained from that. So not all of these ideas are original from my own brain. So I wanted to, of course, give credit where it's due to this book and how impactful it's been so far on my life. But before we get into all the nitty gritty, let's kind of catch up. What's been going on? So I would say the last week, I kind of have been getting a lot of questions like, oh, have you been nesting? I'm like, I don't really know what nesting looks like. For me, I know in the next week or so, I want to write down some recipes and just start kind of, probably week like 37, 38, I'll start prepping some soups and prepping some roasts, canning those, putting them in the freezer, just so that postpartum wise, I can lean in towards the very warm, nourishing foods. That is something I very firmly believe in, is that as your body's under a lot of stress and as it's trying to heal, to give it warm foods can help with that healing process rather than cooling foods. It's just a little bit easier on your digestive system. Food has already been partially broken down. Your body's able to absorb the nutrients without having to work so hard because there's a lot of energy going towards healing other areas or other parts of you. So postpartum, that is kind of my game plan. So like I said, I'm going to try to come up with some recipes, make some sourdough, slice it up, freeze it. I know my mom and grandma are both more than willing to help me prep some things for, that postpartum period, kind of that initial 40 days that I'm going to be taking to just rest, and it's going to feel so uncomfortable. And I think a lot of this episode is coming from that deeply rooted place in my soul that is terrified of rest and terrified of not being productive. And so I've been kind of repeating that to myself of no, the first 40 days, they're intended for you to nourish your body well, support your body well so you can support baby's body. And I'm going to try to do that to the best of my ability. I know for me, I do gain energy from social interaction, and it's not like I'm closing off, nobody can come see me. But I do have some boundaries just in mind that I do kind of want to set around either like hospital visits or home visits. And of course, I like navigating that is tricky because I have so many people around me that I love that I want to come see our baby once it's born, but also recognizing it as a very like sacred time. I also know with this being my first child, it's very special because I actually do get to sit and not relax. I'm not saying it's going to be easy peasy, but I get to sit with my baby for however long I decide to take off from work or how long I decide to just kind of be at home and spend time with my husband. And when you have more kids, like that's not possible. Like it's this very special thing that I'm recognizing is only going to happen once. And so I really just want to savor that and enjoy that. But I know, like I've mentioned in previous weeks, that comes with a lot of mindset work on my own end around being okay with not going 24/7. And so that's really kind of where my focus is right now. We had our appointment today at 35 weeks. When you get to this point in the game, it's like, do you have any questions? No? Okay, whatever. Not to get TMI, but we stopped to look at breast pumps, and I walked in and I was like, no idea what I want, no idea what I need. I don't know a single thing about them. And I think there's just this, not even an expectation. There's probably no expectation, but for me, as prepared as I like to be, I feel like there's a lot of things that I've just not put a lot of research into. Even like when it comes to car seats or strollers, I just get like a lot of questions around that. And I'm going to be honest, like I'm keeping things very, very basic. I don't want all the newest gadgets, the newest cool things to have for your baby. A stroller, don't have one yet. We do have a car seat. And even like the quality of the car seat. My friend Emily, she's due before me. And so I'm like, what car seat did you get? So I'm like, okay, I trust you. I trust the research you did. We're ordering that car seat. And it's just all these little things that I just think like I've maybe expected myself to know that I just don't put a lot of value in. And I mean, it's valuable. Yes. Things that you need. Yes. But at the same time, I don't know. I'm just like not stressed about it. And it feels so out of character for me because, and this could also probably be because my focus is in other places right now, trying to kind of not cram in, but get some things done work-wise and just things that I've volunteered to do wise. Get that all completed within the month of February. So maybe it's because my full attention is not in it, but I just do not feel stressed about any part of it. I feel very calm. I feel very excited. I mean, there's house projects that I want to get done. So I guess in a sense, like, yes, I'm nesting in the sense of like in our bedroom, I want it to feel very comfortable and cozy. We, for the first like year of living in this house, didn't have any trim on most of the rooms because it was like very thin trim that they kind of renovated. Our house, if you don't know, is about 100 years old, probably over 100 years old now. And so there just had been some renovations they did, but I wanted everything to look like how it would have when they built the house. So we took off the trim and now we matched it to match the old trim in the house. Well, anyway, long story short, our bedroom has just kind of been neglected. I mean, you really just don't spend a lot of time in there. And so recently I got like a new bedspread and I got these sconces to go beside the bed that have actually these bulbs. They're super cool and I totally have like geeked out over it over this last week, or I guess since the weekend, but you have like a remote and they're battery powered and you can do red light and you can change like how bright it is, how dim it is. And it is so peaceful to like get into bed and feel like I have a new comforter and it's very cozy. We hung up a photo above our bed and have those sconces. I have my armoire. Saying that word always feels funky to me. But it is a piece of like furniture I got for my clothes because we don't have a lot of closet space. Anyway, I just feel like a lot of things are coming together. And this weekend, my friend Delaney's coming down and I really want to go thrifting and get some like 0 to 3 month old clothes, but look at like artwork or decor for the nursery or for our house And I just feel like because I want that 40 days postpartum, again, the reason that I'm coming back to 40 days is from the book, The First 40 Days, that I read very early on in pregnancy. I actually listened to it in audiobook form. And it really struck me, and I highly, highly recommend. This is something I think I shared on the podcast last week, maybe, how the first 40 days determine the first or the next 40 years of your life as a mother, right? So if you're able to let your body fully heal, fully recover, minimize stress, minimize distractions, spend time off screens, and just savor that time, be taken care of and be okay with being taken care of, really can determine your health for the next 40 years. And it's just crazy, even hormonally, how that can impact you negatively or positively, and how you can fall in that spectrum. So that's kind of where the 40 days is coming from. Like I said, if I know I'm going to have 40 days where I'm basically at home, kind of like a little hermit, I want that time to feel restorative. And a lot of that comes down to my space, my environment. I feel very safe and very comfortable in my environment. The more that I just look at our house, the more I'm I just love our home. There are so many things that we want to change maybe, or I'll give a brief example. I hate even sharing this because it's just but with our basement, we have a washer and dryer down there, and I was going down this weekend to wash some baby clothes, and I opened up that tray that you put the soap in, and just black mold everywhere. And I'm I wonder how long this has been here, And so you have those little things where you're it's not perfect. And then we went on, I told Nathan on Sunday, I'm so ready to rage clean. I want to just get in that state where you're scrubbing everything, you're getting the little cracks, and just rage cleaning essentially. So I kind of rage cleaned our washer. And I told Nathan, I'm honestly, I'm going to say it's at the point of no return. I don't want to keep washing clothes in this. You can't really get all of that out unless you would use bleach or maybe hydrogen peroxide. It's just something I don't want to deal with. Luckily, it came with the house when we moved here. But it's you spend time in the basement, and it's an old basement. Like I said, we live in an old house, and there's just imperfections, right? And there's just things that we want to see change. But when it boils down to it, I always say our basic needs are being met. I feel so safe here. I feel so comfortable. I feel even Luna, our dog, she has been with me through it all. She's that dog you get in your early 20s, and they really just have to grow up with you. It's probably how I'll feel with the first kid too, of they just grow up with you. And she has lived all over. She's lived at my parents'. She's lived in Lincoln. We lived by a fire station, and downtown Lincoln, there was one time she almost got hit because she got off her leash, or I had let her off her leash because I thought I could trust her enough to walk inside, and she swerved me and ran out into the road, a busy street. So I was utter chaos. She's lived downtown Omaha. She has lived in the outskirts of Omaha. Now she's finally on a farm. I'm this poor thing. Her nervous system has to be so at ease now because she was always on alert, especially living by our fire station. And I think she maybe got used to it. But at the same time, I think even our dog is benefiting from living totally away from all of the noise and distractions. And I notice such a difference when I'm here versus when I go back to environments that I maybe previously lived in or towns I previously lived in. It just is you drive and you see maybe one car, it's just been so good and so restorative. And for that, I'm so, so grateful for where we live. And so it's yes, with the good always comes some of the bad and navigating that. But I do truly love our space, and I'm so grateful to have this space to, again, spend that period of time, that fresh newborn phase just at home. And so that's kind of what I'm trying to do, is just making our home feel very warm, very comforting, and prepping the best I can, but not really stressing myself out a little too much over things. Somebody had asked me, are you getting nervous? Are you excited? I'm I think until I'm in active labor, I maybe then will have some nerves, but until then, we're vibing, It's when you realize and you actually think, oh, this thing that's inside of me has to come out of me, that's a little alarming. And I don't think that is actually going to hit until I'm in active labor, like I said. So really, I'm vibing. I feel so good. Planning on going over 40 weeks. Will be grateful if I'm under. But I'm not worried about it. I'm not stressed about it. And I think that's just a really huge blessing. And it also helps that the people around me aren't really stressed about it either. Okay, so then getting into how I am nourishing my mind, body, and spirit. How I'm nourishing my mind truly is having intentional time to read the book that I'm going to refer back to often in today's episode. Again, God in My Everything is what it's titled. We have this chair in our nursery, which if you're watching on YouTube, I am in the nursery. I don't know where I'm going to record this when this is no longer my makeshift office for the time being, but we have a new rocker in here. Excuse me. And sitting there in the morning and just doing my devotional has been so comforting and just really allowed me to enter into the day feeling very relaxed. And I feel like that also contributes to how I'm nourishing my spirit too, is that intentional time stepping away from things, not looking at my phone or opening social media until I have sat and done this. I know, and I feel like I see this often. It's kind of like should we be disciplined? Should things just be a habit? Should we have grace for ourselves? And I think that all can kind of be true at once. I noticed with this, it's something I have to be very disciplined about. Same with exercise, I have to be very disciplined about. And I think we get to a point where even in the holistic health space, right? It's have grace for yourself. Just do what your body is telling you to do and communicating to you. And I say that often with clients. I'm the question you need to be asking yourself is what does my body need right now to feel supported? And I think that is so valid. And I think listening to our body is so valid. But sometimes you have to be disciplined. You have to kind of suck it up and do things that maybe aren't always comfortable, don't maybe fit perfectly in your schedule, require a sacrifice of your time in another area in order to make something a consistent habit. And so that's kind of the phase I'm in. It's something I've implemented really consistently almost every morning is some sort of devotional. But the opening up social media or looking at your phone beforehand is just something I want to nix because it sets my day up for that addiction to want to look at social media, look at my phone. And I don't want that. I've been actively trying to get out of that cycle. And so having the discipline around even my phone in the morning has been big and allowed me to then feel like I have the time, even though I always need to be making the time. I actively feel like I have the time to do a devotional, to read, and spend some time reflecting. And then how I'm nourishing my body. Oh boy, what would this be? I think outside of the basic, I'm just eating balanced meals or I'm exercising, to get more nitty gritty here is I've added in dates. I'm not a red raspberry leaf tea gal, but in the last I think they say 5 weeks of pregnancy, after 35 weeks, you should add in module dates and red raspberry leaf tea to, sorry, all men listening, but to loosen your cervix for delivery. So I'm okay, well, I love dates. Let's have some fun with it. So I've been making different date bark recipes. I'm actually going to be sharing one yesterday. If you're watching this on a Wednesday that it's released, I'm sharing it on Tuesday. But I've been having so much fun with just doing different varieties. The one I'm about to share has dates on the bottom, and then it has a layer of peanut butter, a layer of graham crackers, and then a layer of chocolate with some flaky sea salt. And it is so good. If you tell me you don't like dates after trying that recipe, I will not believe you because it's pretty next level. And so I've been having just a little square of that before bed, not even before bed, in the evening as we sit down to kind of relax. It's tax season, so I feel like something I have been doing is probably eating that a little bit later in the evening than usual because my husband is working a little bit later, just working more hours. And so when we finally sit down together, I'm okay, I'm going to have some dessert. And it's usually some sort of date bark. So that's been really fun. It's been fun to be creative with recipes and to share recipes. Again, I don't know. I feel like that always is what people want to see. I always wonder how many times people actually make things they save on social media. But that's besides the point. I have fun doing it, and it also feels like a really good creative outlet. All right, so let's get into the bulk of today's episode. After that long, chatty catch-up, there's a couple things that I want to read to you because, and I have stories for all of these, but again, these are coming from that book. And there's this little piece here. It says, "You may not be sleep deprived, but you've likely said to yourself one time or another, 'I'm too busy,' or 'I wish I had more time.' You may have fantasized about escaping to a faraway tropical island where you could be free from all your current responsibilities, or have daydreamed of taking an early retirement. You may be mentally consumed with a relationship issue, a financial matter, a health concern, a nagging sense of self-doubt, or troubled by a vague anxiety that you are not doing enough. We long for rest." It says, "Rest not only for our bodies, but for our minds and our souls as well." And this is something that happened very recently for me, actually. I have definitely overcommitted in this last month of kind of less like full month of pregnancy, because there's a lot of things that I do want to get done. And I kind of thought that I would be done taking clients December and then just kind of ride it out June and February. And that has not been the case. I've continued to take on clients, and I do feel like it's manageable, but it's something that, it's kind of like when you disobey something that you told yourself you wouldn't do. And I'm grateful for it. Like, it's something that I love to do. Like, I get emotional when I think about my job because I love it. And I just know me kind of crossing that boundary has been an area where I sent my mom a message, because I've also volunteered to do choreography for a musical that's happening at our school. All things that I love to do, and I don't want to sound like I'm complaining, and I also don't want this episode to sound like I'm bragging or prideful around being busy, because as a society we do that enough. It's more so the opposite. But I had sent her a message, and I'm like, I wish that I could just fall off the face of the earth and disappear and disappoint everybody around me, because I'm done. I'm done. And that was a very blink in time. I know when I was texting that out to my mom, there was just a lot going on. I was getting a lot of long paragraphs of text messages from 10 plus people, and to sort through all of that just stresses me out sometimes. And so I was just kind of at that breaking point. I'm like, I am done. I have done this to myself. I said in that message too, I'm like, the only person I can blame is myself. And I think that's the hardest part. The only person I can blame for wanting to fall off the face of the earth and just disappear is myself, because at some point or another, I didn't communicate boundaries. Maybe I didn't communicate my schedule. I took on too much. I said yes to too much. I expected too much from my body, and my body is tired. My brain is tired. My body is tired. And I really just kind of I wish that we didn't have to get to that point where we're I want to fall off the face of the earth because I'm so tired, or because I need rest so bad. But I think that sometimes that's the point we have to get to before we realize we have an issue. We have a saying yes to too many things issue. I'm speaking for myself. When I say we, I'm 100% talking about myself. I have a saying yes to too many things issue. And it's something that I have gotten so much better about. But I think it's just always been ingrained in me to say yes because you don't want to disappoint, or to be busy all the time, be active all the time. Otherwise, you're not being productive. And I was actually talking to a friend about this last week, and of trying to identify where has this come from? And I know where it's come from, but I think more so recently, Nate and I have had conversations around how can we prevent this for our child? And a lot of it stems back to, truthfully, my growing up years. And this is not criticism to my parents, because I really, really think they did a wonderful job raising me and my brother. But growing up, I remember there would be times after weights in junior high where I would just lay on the couch for an hour or 2 hours, probably watch the Kardashians or something stupid. And it was why are you still sleeping? Why are you still in the house? You need to go do something. Or Sundays, I remember I would just completely shut my door of my room. I would watch YouTube all day. I would lay in bed all day, because at that point I was so exhausted from all the demands of the week. And this is something I've communicated before, but when you go to a small school, and there are so many perks, like this is not a diss on being active and being involved in a lot of things, but I think from a very young age, I was involved in a lot of activities. And then as you get into junior high and high school, I remember getting to school at 7:20 and not leaving school until 9:30 p.m., depending on the day. If I had jazz band, if I then had, a whole day of school and then had sports practice and then had musical practice in the evening. It's all such good things, and I think it's so good for making kids well-rounded, and I think we should be involved. I think that gives you such a sense of community, and I loved those years of my life, but I never really learned how to say no to things, or saying no was maybe out of the normal, right? Like if you didn't go out for a sport, I remember my freshman year, I went out for volleyball, and then after that, I was like, no, I'm not going out for volleyball anymore. There's just too many factors and I hated it. And that was not normal to say no, excuse me, to doing some things. And so I've constantly, I think since then, been in that cycle of like, if I'm sitting, I'm not being productive. If I'm not productive, I'm not adding value. And so it's like retraining our brains to recognize that being productive and kind of asking yourself too that question of like, who am I if I'm not productive? If that's the narrative that you've told yourself forever, is that you have to always be productive, that you have to fill every period of your day or space in your day with something, if you just kind of like disregard that and you say, no, like I'm done, I am resting, who are you if you do that? And how does that change how you maybe show up in life, right? How does that change how you view yourself, how you value yourself? And it's breaking down the narrative that in order to have value, you have to be productive, or you add value by being productive. And it's a really tough thing to navigate, and it's something I don't have an answer for, really, and I've not perfected, but it's tracing it back to, in this conversation, it's so interesting. It's come up so frequently with people around me that I felt like I needed to talk about it because it's like thinking about, well, who really like pushed you to always be doing things? I'm like, well, my parents definitely did. And it was all out of love. Like they wanted me to be a hard worker. They wanted the best for me, and they do. And again, it's not criticism, but it's breaking down then when you get to a point where you no longer need to function at that high of a level of productivity, what do you do? So for example, and I think of this all the time, when I create a to-do list, if I was to talk to a client and be like, let's set some boundaries, let's think about, 3 things that you really need to get done today. What does that look like? And then I look at my to-do list and there's about 12 things on there. I'm like, I'm not taking my own advice. And to me, that feels so disconnected because I can work with people and I can coach people through stress or productivity or issues with never feeling like they're adding value or that they're enough. And when it boils down to it, I still have so much growth that needs to happen in this area to feel like I'm not honestly a fraud when I try to help other people through setting boundaries and taking that time to rest. And I think it is just easier to tell other people to do that than it is to actively practice that yourself. But when Nate and I have had this conversation, he grew up going to a larger school and it was never really ingrained in him that he needed to do every single thing under the sun at school or even extra clubs or activities. And so for him, he had his 2 things that he did when he went to school. And after school, before school, and then after school, he would go to work. And that was just what he did. And so it's navigating, when you have a kid and they've got all these opportunities and you want them to try everything out and you want all these opportunities for them, how can you regulate that or change it in a way so that as they become older, they don't still find themselves in that cycle? And I don't know if that's possible. Obviously, that's where talking to other parents is going to be helpful. Also, just navigating that as the time comes will be helpful. But it's just something that I've noticed. And so when we think about wanting rest, right? For me, I know, okay, every single day of the week, I'm not the best about resting. But if I have one day of the week that I can dedicate and surrender towards rest, I know that's going to set me up for a week that feels much more fulfilling and feels much more productive without having to dedicate so much time to everything, right? So like I can fill every second of my day with things, but what if I didn't? And what if I started my week already in the mindset that I don't need to conquer the world in a day? And so that's where the Sabbath comes in. And there's some things in here that I wanted to read out loud just because it hit so close to home. But it says, the Sabbath heals us from our compulsion to measure ourselves by what we accomplish, who we know, and the influence we have. The Sabbath enables us to define ourselves less by our achievements and more as beloved daughters and sons of God. As we become more aware of how much we are cherished as children of God, we grow in our trust of God. And boy, is this so true. You know, like when you feel like you always have to be doing, and never resting, it's almost like that lack of trust. It is that lack of trust in God and in His ability to provide for you. I know as a business owner, it's like, well, if I worked on Sunday, think of what I could do, what I could promote, how I can make X amount of dollars, right? But it's, again, not trusting God to provide financially, maybe even, relationship-wise. Like you're not putting trust in something bigger to provide for you. You are stuck in that mindset. I am stuck in that mindset of I need to do in order for it to happen. And sometimes when you step back and you let things work themselves out how they are meant to work themselves out, not forcing things, you recognize that you don't always have to be doing in order for progress to happen. And again, like hearing that, it's like, yep, guilty. Like if I could fill, and I do, every second of my day with something, I'm actively doing. I have control. I have all the control. I can control my level of success, my level of money that I make. I can control relationships and how I treat people. And I can control until you get to that point where like, I have to surrender now because I am exhausted. I am burnt out. I pushed myself to a point that I didn't want to get to. And now I have to retract and get back to that place of surrender. And it says here too, in keeping Sabbath, we express our love for God by trusting that He will provide for us even while we are resting. Again, think of the amount of times where you have done less and been more rewarded. And I'm not even talking in financial gifts, but when you just sit back and let things happen how God has intended them to happen, you realize that you didn't need to be micromanaging everything in order to make change occur. And that is really hard, I think, sometimes to remember, which again is why I found myself in that cycle of just do, so you have the control and not surrendering. And so there's something in here too that says the Sabbath requires surrender, right? So the Sabbath, when I talk about the Sabbath, we're thinking of one day of your week. At least this is how I am interpreting it. You're thinking of one day of your week that you are disconnected. You are not working. You have set aside that time to do things that feel rejuvenating, right? So there's some questions here around just that surrender piece that I want to encourage you to kind of think about, or at least that I've thought about and reflected on recently. Because when we surrender, it makes us recognize too that work is never going to be done, right? And it even says it in here. It says the Sabbath requires surrender. If we only stop when we are finished, our emails, our projects, we will never stop because work is never completely done. And that is so true. Like work is never done. So you're always going to have it to come back to. But if you are not intentionally stepping away from it, taking time away from it, you are not going to reach that point of surrender because you always have that like little bit in you that's like, yeah, like I'm going to surrender kind of. Like, yeah, God, like I trust you, but like just a tiny bit, right? Like, or maybe I trust you a lot, but there's like that little bit in me that like I still need to do in order for things to happen. And I'm not saying we can just sit on our booties all day long for the entire week and be like, oh yeah, God's got it. I trust him. And I think that would be an incredible place to be at. But to some point, I think action has to support that. And so that's where I'm not asking myself to take 5 days off throughout the week and only work 2 days, but I'm asking myself to take one day and truly sit and do what I want to do, what feels rejuvenating, what feels restful that day. Other questions too here around this, like I said, who am I if I'm not productive? Who am I if I don't provide? Now that's a tricky one too, as I enter into, the next however many weeks after I have this baby, right? I'm not actively providing financially for my family. Not saying I'm the primary provider, but I've always really valued being able to provide and provide in terms of finances, and financial gifts. And so it's like, well, who am I if I'm not providing? Who am I if I'm sitting on the couch most days with my baby and enjoying and savoring that special little blink in my life without the obsessiveness of needing to do? And so that's where even I've had to set the boundary around like March 1st being the day that I'm done one-on-one working with clients until I come back from maternity leave, even though I have no idea when this child is going to come. Setting that firm date, right? Like March 1st potentially being the last day that I have any sort of exercise classes that I lead, but setting that boundary already for myself, knowing that I can work on things outside of that. There's projects outside of that I can focus on. But when it comes down to it, like I can set that for myself, and then I can set 8 weeks out from that period of time, or however many weeks, it's probably going to be like mid-May, beginning of June by the time I'm working with clients again. And I can be okay in that season of not doing, and I can surrender to the fact that I will not be actively providing like I have been more recently, right? Like since I've started coaching and having a business, and I'm okay with that. Like right now, I truly do feel okay with that. That's not to say I won't get into that season of life and be like, oh my gosh, like I'm not doing enough. Like my husband's going back to work and I'm just sitting here. Like I'm not to say those feelings won't come up or if those thoughts haven't crossed my head, but something that I've had to really focus on. Another piece of this too, who am I if I don't enjoy rest, right? So it's hard to get into it. For me, it's really hard to rest, but once I'm resting, I'm really not wanting to do anything outside of that. And it's kind of like, I don't know, when you take time away and you just do not nothing, but you don't focus so much or get so obsessive over work or your to-dos for the day or activities that you're involved in, and you just sit with yourself at home. If you do that and you spend even a few days doing that, at least for myself, I've noticed getting back into the swing of things is really difficult because my body is like, wait a second, like we like this, like we like rest. So who are you if you don't enjoy rest? Who are you if you do enjoy resting? Does that make you lazy, or at least do you feel like it makes you lazy to enjoy rest? So the other piece of this here is that Sabbath requires sacrifice. It requires you to say no to things. There is, even like with this weekend, right? So Sunday is the day that I take as a Sabbath. I have for the last 3 weeks. And I'm going to talk about what that's looked like for me, because you all can kind of make your own, not rules, kind of rules. Honestly, they imply in here making rules because you don't have a rule just for having the sake of a rule, but a rule is meant to kind of keep you in line. And so with saying no, I've even communicated to my husband too. I'm like, if things get planned on a Sunday and it requires a certain amount of driving, or it requires my entire weekend to be spent somewhere outside of my home, like I'm probably going to say no. And that feels uncomfortable because I think historically it's like, well, I'm disappointing people, right? And I don't want people to think I don't want to spend time with them because I don't choose to spend my Sunday or my Sabbath with them. But at some point you have to eventually say no, or you're going to get stuck in that cycle of just obviously, yes, saying yes. And I think back to even when I was a kid, And when we think about having our own kid as well, it's like, well, if they're involved in sports and they play on Sundays, right? If that's the day we decide as a family, we're taking as our day as a family together as the Sabbath, what if they don't go to that sporting event, right? Like, what if they don't play on a Sunday? I know how I don't know, I probably would have reacted when I was a kid of like, why aren't they coming to our basketball tournament on a Sunday? That's weird. And it's because as a kid, I don't think you think about that. But even like as a coach, like you have a player that doesn't come to a basketball tournament on a Sunday because that's the time that their family spends together and they honor that day. How do we react? How do we react as a society to that? Like that is so outside of the societal norms that I think it's sometimes looked at like, oh, come on. Like, really? We're going to do this? Like your kid is playing in a basketball tournament. Just show up for the basketball tournament. And so I think that will be interesting too as things get planned on our Sundays. And I notice that a lot with like kids sports, right? Gets planned on Sundays. Like how do you approach that? And I feel a lot differently about that now than I did at any point up until honestly, probably the last year. Before that, I would have been like, if my kid's involved in something, they're going to show up for their team because that's important. And it is. But I was talking to somebody this weekend, again, kind of around like saying no and not just being in that state of like, go, go, go. And she was sharing with me that she's like, I don't even know if I truly enjoyed and was present in those points in my kids' lives when we were busy on the weekends, we were busy during the week, they were coaching, because they were actively always thinking of the next thing. And we find ourselves there, right? If you don't have a day where you just sit and you reflect and you take time and take a deep breath, you do find yourself in that like go, go, go mentality, and you're not actually present in enjoying every area that you're involved in or every aspect of your life, which not saying you have to enjoy every aspect, but you know what I'm saying, along the lines of like, you just can't be in that like head down, go, go, go type of mentality and expect to truly savor and take in everything that's happening around you. I also think for me, this desire to have a Sabbath day is to show sacrificial love, right? So Sabbath requires sacrifice. Yes, I think for me, I want to show more sacrificial love. And my husband and I had this conversation recently too around how, I would say there's two people in my life when I think of sacrificial love that come to mind. The first is going to be my grandma, and the second is going to be my husband. And that's not to say there aren't a variety of people around me that also do, but those are the two that just like so vividly come to mind. And that's something that I think because I've always been head down, go, 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 do 1,000 things every single day. Again, I'm not priding myself on that. I'm just truthfully sharing like where I find myself most of the time, and I'm not proud of it. There's a lot of things that I don't do for other people because I feel so burnt out when it finally comes time to serve other people that I don't have, obviously, the energy to do that. Even little things like, my husband is so good about like, if he does something for me, he knows it'll take a load off my plate, and that to him feels like very fulfilling. And for me, I look at that and I'm like, he's always doing things for me. I don't think I ever do anything for him. And then I feel like that guilt, right? And I'm like, but I don't make the time to do that either. And I don't prioritize that, and I want to. And I think about my grandma too, and this thought of like productivity always comes to mind of like, the more productive you are, the more you can provide financially, the more value you add. And I think about her, and really since she's had kids, she's worked in the home, and she has provided so many other aspects to her relationship, to her family's health, to her own health. She's the person where if you have a surgery or something, she will bring you food even if you're not the bestest of friends. Like, she's going to bring you something because to her, like, that is how she serves. Like, she has the biggest servant's heart ever. She's very special to me, which is why it makes me emotional. But I think I look at her and I'm like, she is not less valuable to me because she doesn't maybe make X amount of dollars, or because she's not busy all the time. And so it's like, why have we convinced ourselves that that has to be what it looks like to add value? Because she adds value to everybody's life. And so, wow, you're going to have to bear down with me for these next 5 weeks if I'm going to be emotional about everything. My goodness. Last episode, when I started recording and I didn't actually post it, I was like sobbing. I'm like, why am I crying? It's so ridiculous. But we're all friends here, so I know you're not judging me. But like I'm saying, it's like that sacrificial love that when other people look at us, right, like they see that. They don't see all these things that we're maybe stressed about, that we put so much energy into, that like at the end of the day don't really matter. They matter, and I know in the moment they matter. These things we say yes to, that we overcommit to, they matter in the moment. But at the grand scheme, at the end of our lives, like what matters is how you showed love to other people and what you did and the time you took to spend with other people. And I think I'm just like tired of being in that point where I fill my schedule so full that I don't spend time taking care of other people, or I don't spend time with other people. And so I wrote down here too about sacrificial love. I said, if we measure our own value based on productivity, we miss out on radically loving other people, right? If we are always doing, we are not giving space to love people. And I don't like that. I think I spend a lot of my week showing a lot of care towards people, but it's like, if it's people that I, of course, like that I value, that I work with, that I care so, so deeply about. But again, it's like people that kind of enter my life for a season. I can support them. They support me, truthfully. We can develop a relationship and a friendship, but it's really, in the grand scheme of life, pretty short term. Like my goal for clients is that they become independent, that they aren't dependent on me, that they feel confident in their own ability to support their body and support their health. And so if I think about all of my energy every single week going into those 30 plus people, it's like that in itself like is so valuable. But if I don't have anything left over for the people around me that will be in my life forever or for a long, long time, like what is that, right? Like it's fulfilling. Every week is fulfilling, but I feel like by not having a day to set aside to pour into other people or to pour into my relationships, like I'm neglecting some of the most important relationships in my life. So let's get into some Sabbath supporting habits and activities. And this is actually an activity I do, or I've kind of integrated into my foundations course, which is not been released yet. It's something that I'm actively working on and kind of preparing as I take time off. It's an 8-week course focused around the foundations, right? Like building the foundation so you can rebuild upon that, right? Like getting those crucial habits in place to support your body, and then you can add in dietary changes that are specific to health concerns, or you can add in supplementation or blood work or different protocols, right? But you have to have that baseline level of support. So all of that to say, we will do like, what are some health supporting habits? What are some health hindering habits? And so I thought that like the verbiage was pretty comparable here, right? Like Sabbath supporting habits and activities. And again, these are very specific to me, but they also do play off the framework of this book and kind of what he's outlined. If you're interested, like please go read this book. Again, I'm not going to take any credit for what I'm about to share with you, but just thinking about the Sabbath and spending that time in worship. So for me, my Sabbath is on Sundays from sun up to sundown. That's kind of how I've identified how I'm going to approach the Sabbath. And so I want to spend time in worship, prayer time with my husband, and devotional time with him as well. We are currently reading through, right now it's the journey of Paul. Before that, it was the journey of Jesus. And it's just kind of like how they've broken down different scripture to get you to read the whole Bible in, I think it's like 3 years. It's not an overly ambitious amount of time, but you're reading about a chapter every single time. So sitting down and doing that with him. Also thinking about things that are energy giving. So, asking yourself, who do you want to surround yourself with on that day of rest that gives you energy? Or maybe who do you not necessarily want to spend time with on that day? Which I know might sound kind of rude or judgmental, but I think it's important, right? Like you want to spend time with people or doing activities that are going to give you energy. Also asking yourself that question around this, like what makes you feel rested? So he gives the example of, I think, his brother-in-law, who is like a professor, spends a lot of time writing. So on his Sabbath, he goes fishing. It's the complete opposite of how he spends his week, and that's what makes him feel rested. So for me, that would be spending time outside, if I'm able, going outside for a walk. I actually more recently recognized too, not exercising on Sunday outside of going for a walk or doing some stretching, because that was always something, I mean, every day of the week, that's honestly, for the most part, like I make that a priority, probably 6 days a week, because I do love to do that and I love to support my body in that way. But I've noticed that on Sundays previously, when we'd get back from church, when my husband likes to like make a coffee and sit on the couch, I would be like, well, I'm going to go work out before we have lunch, right? Because I want to have it done for the day, but I want to do it after church. And instead it's like, no, I'm going to make a coffee and I'll sit on the couch with my husband. Like it's setting those boundaries kind of for yourself too, or recognizing like, okay, but me also focusing on going and exercising it's time that I'm not spending with him that I want to, because he gives me energy. And again, it's that like sacrificial love. Like I don't need to go work out on a Sunday if it means I can spend more time with you. Outside of this too, it's like disconnecting from distractions. So for me, not opening up social media, minimal texting. This is an area that I'm still kind of navigating. For me, no social media, I can do that. But completely shutting off my phone for the day. I've done that a couple Sundays. This last Sunday, I had it shut off up until about it was about 3:30 in the afternoon. But really it started because I woke up on Sunday and I had paragraphs of texts that I knew were work related or volunteer related, and I just could not do it. I'm like, I'm done. I'm shutting off my phone for the day. I can't look at this. And then when it came time to like making plans with my parents for the Super Bowl, I was like, okay, I'm going to turn my phone back on. That's all that I'm going to do. I'm just going to call my mom or I'm going to text my mom. And so setting boundaries, I think it's a little bit hard if you can't be 100% disconnected when it comes to like your phone or distractions around your phone. But another piece of this too is like not listening to health focused podcasts, because again, my whole week is filled with that. Like I want to do things that are different. Watching TV, this is something I only do like if it's an activity that Nate and I can do together. That's what I would enjoy doing, is just watching a show, watching TV. I know that can be a distraction, but for me, it's like, well, I'm spending time with him. Maybe we're watching a show that we really enjoy. And again, that's that quality time piece that for me, that doesn't feel like a distraction, but like the phone usage or getting on social media on Sunday feels like a complete distraction. So something I've kind of nixed out of my Sabbath. Also intimacy. So this could be with a partner or a friend, like spending quality time with them and again, those energy giving people, but really valuing intimacy, especially like with your partner, if that's something that you want to fill your Sunday with. Not saying this needs to look a certain way or implying anything with saying that word, but just in itself of like, who are you with? Who do you love spending time with? Who do you need to pour into to both them feel valued and appreciated in your life, but also recognize yourself how important that relationship is for you to have and not ignoring it. Because we get busy, like I've said, or we get distracted throughout the week, and maybe we give less attention to our husbands, or if you're a man listening to like your wife, right? So if you really prioritize that intimacy on one day, not saying that you shouldn't have that play into the rest of your week, I do feel like it kind of has that like trickle effect of like, you want to do things for your partner, you want to support them, you want to provide for them, and it just, again, it kind of like continues on into your week if you have that one day where you get to be with them and support them and love on them. So ultimately, kind of what this boils down to, at least to me, is to do something different, right? So what is going to be restorative for you? If you're listening, you're like, ooh, yeah, like that sounds very nice to have a day where I can say no to a lot of things and I can fill it with things that feel restorative. Reflect on that question and take some time thinking about what that would look like, and get really honest with yourself too, and vulnerable with yourself around like what has to give, what do you have to say no to, what do you have to put boundaries around. And this is just some final kind of like takeaways or reminders here, but it doesn't always need to be a Sunday. For me, I think that works the best because it's usually when the least amount of things are planned. But I've also noticed that because our weekends are typically not always planned, that's when we fill things in, or when people fill things in for us. And so I really just want to be good about, yes, if it's something on a Sunday that is energy giving and it's something I want to go do or people I want to go spend time with, like I'm even thinking I have a bridal shower on a Sunday this month, like I will be there 100%, and I desire, like I want to be there. So it doesn't mean like you can't leave your house and have to be like locked in. I think it looks a little different. Like I said, for you, it's going to look different. For me, it looks like being at home because a lot of my week is spent at home, but it's not restorative and it's not restful. Or it's spent running around and doing a lot of different things. And again, I just want to be at home in the security of my home most Sundays, unless, like I said, there are things planned that I want to go do. It's not like I'm restricting myself to only being in my house on Sunday, but I think that for me at least has been a good starting point for setting the boundary of like, nope, I'm going to be at home because that's how I know I can rest and support my body on my Sabbath. And I also think too, you have to remember it's okay if boundaries need to be set or communicated with people around you. Like I said, if things are planned on Sundays and it requires 2 hours of driving for me, like I'm probably not going to go unless it's something that I do think it fits within kind of like the desire that I have for that day of my week. And kind of finally wrapping this up is typically I think of it from being sun up to sundown. So that's where like even if you're a student and you're like, I would love to take Sundays off, but I have to study all day Sunday. Maybe from sun up to sundown, you don't study and you do restorative activities. Then in the evening, you study for a few hours before you go to bed. So evaluating that, and if that feels maybe like a better starting place rather than from like midnight to midnight, for you, it's more of like sun up to sundown. I know for me, I like this as well because I like to kind of have a game plan as I enter into my week. So as the sun goes down around like maybe after supper, spending 5 to 10 minutes just looking at my calendar for Monday, knowing what calls I have, what things I need to get done on that day, jotting that out and kind of creating my to-do list to set me up for the week feels very good. That way it's not like I'm blindly walking into Monday, but once the sun goes down, that's when I can kind of turn it back on and at least put a little focus into work. So hopefully you have gained something from this. This is a topic, like I said, I am not perfect in, and I am actively practicing, actively trying to create a discipline around. And I wanted to share that with you in real time versus me being like, oh yeah, I've been doing this for months and I'm perfect. Like, no, that's not the case. This is very new. This is something that I've identified though that I need and that my body needs, that my mind needs, that the people around me need, so I can show up better for them too, because that is important to me. And I want to be able to feel like I have the energy to pour into the people around me and not just the people that I interact with during the week. So with that, let's go ahead and close today's episode in prayer. Just a reminder too, on my website, and you'll actually find the link in the description of the episode, there is a link for you to put in a prayer request. So you can always put in a prayer request throughout the week. It sends it to my email so that I can also be praying for you both outside of the podcast, but also on the podcast. So let's go ahead and close today's episode in prayer. So dear Lord, just thank you for the opportunity to take a deep breath, the opportunity to slow down and identify what our bodies and our minds need, what the people around us need to both feel supported and to show that sacrificial love that you show us all the time, that we can just give a sliver of that to the people around us and prioritize that in our own lives. Lord, I pray for CT and safety as she is traveling, and that she really just leans on you throughout this season of life, regardless of what it looks like, reminding that you are kind of the center that everything else orbits around. I also pray for BK and safety for her as she's traveling this weekend. Keep them safe on the road or while they're flying, and that they just get to wherever they need to get to safely. I also pray for ER and just her confidence, and that continues to grow as she continues to navigate her clinical rotations, that you give her the wisdom and the strength and the empathy to show up and support the people around her in that role. I also pray for MA and her sister and whatever it is that she's going through, and that she's able to both show up for her sister and support her sister in the season where she is needing some of that. And finally, I just pray for security on those who don't maybe feel like it's in the budget to have food or even purchase gas, or that their basic needs just aren't being met right now. I pray that you provide for them in a way that is just radical and so different than anything they've experienced. And that through these droughts, seasons of drought or seasons where they don't feel financially secure, that they lean on you and that you, again, just provide for them in a way that they've never experienced. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, so if you're interested in following along with my life outside of the podcast, you can find me at Nourish with Bailey on Instagram, Bailey Seaton on everything else. My email is always in the description of the episode along with my website. Both great ways to get connected if you are interested in getting some additional support, having some questions answered, not promising I can answer all of them, or if you have some questions for me, feedback, want to support the show, of course, I would love to hear from you, and I'd love to hear how I can also be supporting you. So with that, I'll talk to you again next Wednesday. Bye.